We almost got it to the point in the song where it said, "Here we go," and we were going. That would have been epic, wouldn't it?
I was gonna say, just missed
Gotta
the
get
post.
better.
Just missed
Gotta.
it. All right, let me get the audio down so we're not blaring the electronic in the background for our people in chat. So welcome everyone to another Confab, another Thursday. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Welcome.
I'm trying to think. I'm hearing audio in the background here, and it turns out that that is from my phone because I'm watching chat in the stream here as well. Good morning, Leah. How are you? How was your week? Hello, geek dudes. Yes, we are here to be fully in geekdom today, I think is the intent. We're doing some customer insight stuff today, right, guys?
That's it.
That's right.
It should be kind of fun. I have not played around with customer insights in some time now, and I don't know, maybe I don't know if anyone in the audience even knows about customer insights. Does anybody, I guess in chat, does anybody know anything about customer insights on Dynamics 365 by chance? I'm curious if anybody's heard of it, if they came for it. Excited to see. Thank you, Brett. It should be fun. Should be a fun day today. Just waiting for anyone. I guess in the background, this is something that we have been exposed to by Microsoft a couple separate times, and we've actually used in some of our solution concepts that we've presented to prospects, for example. But we've never really gone through the full gambit with it. But it sounds like, Adam, you had kind of a deep dive that you went into with it. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I know to kind of give a little bit of history on our, hands. Scott actually did a tremendous D365 CI demonstration internal, like so for the Stoneridge masses, and that really kind of opened some eyes on how powerful the Microsoft CDP or customer data platform really can be. And so that was I think my first immersion into an exposure into CI. And I was like, oh man, this is awesome. And Microsoft has really been driving this as a solution in a BI data orchestration space. So a number of weeks after that initial touch point and initial immersion, there was serendipitously an airlift, so a customer insights airlift training course that was conducted by John Weiss at Microsoft. He did an excellent job, especially with everybody being remote and trying to herd all the cats, so to speak. It was great. So going in, playing with the data, seeing what you can do with it, understanding the power and the story of this, and how it plays into a broader enterprise stack of biz apps and data-driven decision making. It was awesome.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So just at a high level, I mean, so the airlift is like a deep dive, right? So I mean, they're going over the basic structures with this, but at the highest level, for people that don't know anything about customer insights, what did they position customer insights for? When should you as a customer or a prospect look at wanting or needing this solution that we're going to show today and show some of the capabilities, but what are they saying it should be targeted for?
Right. I think the most common business case or use case was, we're living in a world where the CRM and ERP worlds are now coalesced. Like now we're living in the world of CDS. We're living in the world of the Power Platform. So the more we centralize that data, the easier it gets to use tools like, just native charts and native data visualizations and drawing some conclusions and telling data stories with the native tooling, whether that's more of a customer engagement tool set or a more of a finance, supply chain, business central, or ERP tool set. Regardless, maybe Power BI, maybe some other tools too, but that doesn't tell the complete enterprise data story more often than not. More often than not, we also have point solutions that are elsewhere. Maybe we've got e-commerce setups or point of sale solutions that have dedicated databases. Maybe you have a team or a subset of your organization that's still maybe living in Access or Excel. So, while we drive and build and enable core work streams and core teams for organizations, there will always still probably be data living on the periphery. And how do we bring all of that together? all of it. And with customer insights, it's not just looking at a CDS database. It's not just looking at something from maybe Azure. It's not just looking at the most important data. It's looking at all of the data, and it's bringing all of your data into one place in a true to consolidate to a true customer match, a true customer record that has everything in aggregate rolling up underneath it. So it's pretty powerful stuff.
But I got my BI guy and he does all that. Why would
Well,
I? Well, doesn't my
well,
BI guy do all that?
keeping in message and keeping in theme with what Microsoft has really been driving for the past 5 years is democratization and ease of access and easier entry points. So, you look at what, and we're going to take a look at today, what Dynamics 365 Customer Insights can do is bring BI cubing and bring, a lot of the what has historically been more of a technical job or a technical role that you carve out that somebody handles and manages based on requirements, and puts that in the laps of business analysts, and that puts that in the laps of people that can use this tool, can use this UI in this tool to bring in all the data that they need and start driving those analytics. So it's low code. I mean, this is here. We might not even see any code at all. Maybe, Scott, like maybe we'll see some snippets here and there, like when you get into Azure stuff. But
Yeah, yeah. Well,
like,
yeah. So the table mapping, right? Like
yeah,
that's as
yeah.
technical as we're gonna get on this stream.
Yeah.
So
So it's a
pre-sales
low
guys here.
code, no code, BI and data orchestration tool that has some pretty amazing outputs. And we're going to talk about how this plays into other applications or other use cases. But this is on brand with the low code, no code, less code, more power. Really getting this out to other people that maybe they're not thinking in terms of schema and code and tables and relationships. Maybe they're thinking about key performance indicators and what's going to drive our business, but there's a middle ground there, and that's really where this lives.
And it's really interesting the depth that or the lack of depth that a lot of companies face in terms of their customer insights, like understanding some of their basics. Like there are systems, so organizations I've been involved with that they're different divisions. They all share the same customer. They're selling maybe, for example, insulation and then roofing materials, but those are different divisions within the organization, and they can't see a unified customer view of their data. And this is a company that has people that work on reports all the time. They have a technical staff on staff basically to be able to tackle these issues, but they just don't have the tool set basically to then tackle that very easily or effectively, or not very quickly. It's very you know, very costly, I guess.
Prohibitive
Exactly.
at
Yep.
times,
Exactly.
or you're baking in, and this is the same sort of message and the high value of something like Power Apps or virtual agents or Flow or Power Automate. You can, when I said democratize before, you can put this in the hands, keeping in mind governance and making sure people are doing the right things the right ways. But you can get this in the hands of people who have the vision, the business vision, and start working with it. So you don't have to wait, say, 6 weeks or
Oh, did we lose Adam
might
there?
be, or what
All
some of
right.
those constraints might be. You don't have to wait for IT to go through a backlog to get your report or to get your insights. This is something that you can use, you can drive, you can jump into and start working with.
Yeah, and I think of that with measures. If you think about an analytics cube or something like that, where you come up with another measure, that can be quite time consuming to add that to a data warehouse or a cube and then reprocess things. That's not. Sometimes it's just not a simple task.
Hmm.
Yep.
Cool. Well, so I guess we might as well just go through and kind of compare a little bit of this too, because the entry point for most people is going to be this splash screen, right? They're gonna maybe be on this stream, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, let's take a look at customer insights, right? And so you're gonna end up basically here, and you could go to Google and search for it. But obviously, what it's doing is it's the sales and marketing material, talking about some of the major features here. So a holistic view of your customers, discovering insights, and then taking action as well. So taking this aggregated data and then using it within other systems too, which we'll look at a little bit more today as well. Adapting it as well. This looks like this is actually a Power App that's consuming then some of that data and reporting off of it. and then basically building it on a secure platform. Because obviously, now that you're dealing with all your customer data, and if you're unifying it too, data regulation is going to be, and data governance is going to be something that's very critical, right, for that. And then we get to our pricing, right? And there it is. Look at that, $1,500 per tenant per month. So, I mean, price point, it's not prohibitively bad, but at the same point, where do you start seeing, is there scalability options with this, Adam? Did they talk about the future of what they want to do with this platform? AI
We
is
didn't.
what I heard as well, right?
Yeah, I didn't get too in the weeds on that, or in the reads on that. We talked about the base price. So this is through the airlift. We talked about the base price, and that, you can see that underpinning that price tag was per 100,000 unique customer profiles. So we're going to go through and talk about how we match and merge. Because we can have, what does it say right there? It's that contact up top.
Contact us or whatever it is.
Patty Melendez.
Okay, yep.
You can have a Patty Melendez coming from CDS. You can have a Patty Melendez living in an Excel sheet out somewhere. You can have a Patty Melendez in some legacy application database. So part of this process is to consolidate holistically who truly is Patty Melendez, and all of the transactions or all of the activities or all of the pieces that live underneath or around that contact or that customer. So in the pricing, when you match and merge all this stuff, you find that true customer record. So this price tag is going up to 100,000 true customer profiles. So if you're out in the world, if you're one of the Best Buys or Cargills or the huge global enterprises, there will be some considerations in scaling and cost. But for most of the organizations that I think I've spoken about this with, we wouldn't really hit in terms of the true customer profile, something around 100,000, especially in B2B scenarios.
Yeah, and I'm just calculating. So for value, I mean, this is what I typically do just to start to get the level playing field. Because Rad, I mean, I agree. Initially, I look at this, I'm like, that's pretty expensive, right? For the customer insights with it. Let's just play it, play this side of it,
Sure.
right? So $18,000 is what you're looking at to have something that can take, aggregate, map, and then build that true unified experience, different sources, you name it. And if you think about like labor rates, so take 215. I'm sorry, wrong buttons I'm pressing here. So, and you take that and say 18,000 that we have, and let's say that that's going to be over that rate that we have. I mean, that's 83 hours of consulting time basically that you could pay. I want to see somebody build a customer cube in 83 hours, right? I mean,
I don't.
it's like it's not going to happen. So if you start, and that's the thing I want to highlight here, is that this is BI as a concept for an end user type environment. It's not typically, what I'd classify as the end user. The end user is using it to consume the data. There has to be a power user involved, so somebody that understands Excel, tables, where the data sources are, and some of that setup that's related to it. But at 83 hours of services that you could provide, I think that the value here is pretty considerable, and we'll dive into it a little bit more too. But you've got to
Yeah,
be the judge of that, right? That's what I want to be careful about.
exactly.
I think even
Like,
in the chat was some allusion there to the number of customers. If you have 100,000, that's different than if you have 1,000, or
Ex-
that's dramatically different then.
Exactly. And I mean, the other thing too is you got to think about it too is ongoing. Like, so next year, the argument is, well, Scott, as I keep on going with this, it's going to be 80 hours, 80 hours. I could have built a cube in 400 hours, for example. Well, 400 hours, I mean, that's going to take you 5 years to get to, and they're going to be improving this product. In fact, let's talk about that, because with customer insights, obviously, this is part of the Dynamics 365 AI capability. So they're continually adding updates to the Dynamics
mhm.
365 platform. And what they're also doing is that they're basically making it now as well, where we have different insights that we can get to, right? So if I remember, don't we now have on the release plans, don't we have like not customer insights, but there's product insights and marketing insights that are coming as well? Did
Yeah,
you
right
guys
there.
hear about
Service,
that?
customer service insights,
Yep.
product insights.
So here's
Yeah.
product insights, and these are actually all around then that insight structure, so that AI, and I'd expect that to continually to add. So they do products, they do a vendor one would make sense, a fixed asset one would make sense possibly. I mean, to make these insights then that are just taking and aggregating your data. Because Marcus, didn't you have an opportunity that we did show this with, where it took the data from jobs, for example, and then showed the metrics for jobs basically in one of the demos?
Yeah, we use the customer insights base, brought in job and service information actually out of Business Central. We never actually got to the point of showing it to the prospect, but we built out a prototype anyway.
Okay, to go
Yeah.
through and do
But I
that.
wonder about the product insights if you couldn't do that around planning. If you've got both purchasing and selling information, does that aggregate that data together?
Yeah, and that's a question because if you look at the other one, so customer insights is what we can look at today and go through, obviously. But these marketing insights and then product insights, they're not generally available yet. They're in preview, if I remember correctly, but they're going to then support some of these market-specific insights and then some of the product-specific insights. And like I said, there's no vendor one that they've said yet, but it would make sense to have a pre-built analytics engine that you could just add your fields to and then have a nice landing space then to interact with it on. So
Yeah, vendor performance we get asked about quite a bit now. That's a regular question.
Yeah, what was the question?
Just vendor performance, vendor insights, understanding that relationship performance, all those types of questions.
Yeah. Yep. Go ahead, Adam.
To that point specifically, vendor performance, or any sort of, if you're talking about sales performance, any sort of win-loss ratios, or any sort of like product development insights that you're looking for, or consumption insights that you're looking for. You think about Scott, to your point a few minutes ago, like brainstorming and getting down requirements and getting the metrics that we need and the formats that we need and to the users that we need. That is a whole process. And for some that I've been a part of, that takes well over 83 hours for one business measure. For for a single business measure, to make sure that we're cascading that out to our enterprise. This is taking a layer, is taking a UI, and with features and functionality both on the ML and AI side, as well as just general data and looking at it and analyzing it with the tools that are baked in. This is not just amplifying that and making it more accessible, but we're leaning into the intelligence portion of it too. So if you think about the process and the time it takes to get a single value adding KPI on a dashboard and getting that out to your enterprise, this is now taking that and going to n number of measures in a consolidated space, with relative asterisk ease to get that pushed out.
Well, let's experiment with it. So I guess for you guys, what I would recommend, if you want to, kind of take this, we record these obviously, and then you can go back to it if you want to, and then pull it up on YouTube, for example. We have not done this before. We've actually kind of scripted them before and done setup. I actually spun up a brand new environment before, and I wanted to go through this. It'll be all of us exactly. Adam's like, yeah, fingers crossed, right? So this is not a customer-facing demo, right? That's the difference. So, but what you want to do is you want to click on the Get Started, and there's a setup then that basically you can say for a trial environment, you can actually go down here and then sign up for a free trial, and it's a 30-day free trial. And basically what it'll generate is an environment, and I have my environment right here, that has basically, I called it Confab CI as the example, and then a demo environment too, so we can take a look at some of the demo data, just in case this does not go perfectly to plan, and I'm assuming it won't, because we want to reflect to those that, we make it sound easy, but there's a lot of thought that needs to go into this as well, meaning when you do a cube, let's talk about like a measure, like Adam was saying, for 80 hours of what that measure is. A lot of that's around the architectural perspective of setting up the data warehouse, understanding what technology we're using to populate that data warehouse, what's our middleware component that's then scheduled to grab all this information, what is the cube table structure that's been flattened need to look like, right? So these are technical events that we're talking about that this really handles, I think, in a much nicer fashion, Adam, at least in my opinion. But when we talk about the generation of those measures, the understanding of them, the talking to the business with them, that entire process doesn't change. You should still be doing that. You should still be understanding what you want to see as part of your output that you're driving the business with for those insights, for example, when you go through this process. So make sure,
Pre
yeah, you've got to do some diligence up front, due diligence up front, right? Go ahead, Adam.
Pre-planning, and that was stressed in the airlift session too. And I mean, if you think about it, yeah, we get excited and we see new tools and we want to jump in, and everybody wants a silver bullet solution. You click a few buttons and you have everything that you want or have ever wanted or needed for your business. That's never like going to be the case.
Yep.
Pre-planning and having the right minds and voices at the table to make sure that your success criteria is laid out, your business measures are very well defined. That whole pre-planning and design and build, even before the build and actually getting hands dirty with any data, that is especially for something like customer insights, because you are, and I don't mean this as a knock, but you are locked into a certain way of doing things for this.
Yeah.
So that pre-planning and understanding where things marry up and where there are gaps, that's probably the most important piece of making customer insights successful for your business. And that's really where a lot of the time is going to be spent before any sort of execution or any sort of technical activities.
Yep. Agreed. So kind of going through the steps here. So we have an instance that's set up that we generated then just ahead of time. I have another environment too. So this is my finance and operations instance. So this is D365 finance or supply chain is what they label it now. And in here, what I also did is I did a setup. We have what's called our entity store, and you can imagine it as a grouping of tables of measures. It's basically a pre-set up cube that we have inside of D365 Finance or Supply Chain. And what I've done is I've actually integrated this into the Azure Data Lake. So you can go into your environment, set up the entity store so it works correctly. There's an upgrade that you have to basically say that you accept to start having that. And there's documentation on this as well. And we covered it in our tech council meeting. But what we also did then is we enabled the data connection here. So this is basically taking data from within our entity store and then saving it out into the data lake. And the reason that we experimented with this for our tech council meeting was because we wanted to see a cost reduction in storage, because that's one of the things that's becoming a little bit evident now as we start looking at this common data storage concept. That storage and data, the transactional data, you got to really think through how you're storing it and where you're storing it for that history. And that's a strategy that we're starting to think through more, because the cost of data lake, for example, for a gigabyte per month, it's like 0.008 cents or something like that, guys, if I remember correctly, for blob storage. When you compare that to CDS storage, which is $40 per gig right now.
And that's even so much better than, I'm just having like flashbacks of the mid 2010s or early 2010s of CRM, true like SQL storage, and it getting completely gunked up and eaten up by files and attachments. And now that's all separated. But even still with CDS today, absolutely, you're gonna, if you're a high volume organization, high transaction volume organization, first 5 years of having something stood up, you're at some point you're gonna realize this problem.
Yep. And I think it's important to note that, we as partners are pushing back as well on this, meaning, we're having conversations with Microsoft and saying, hey, you told us that you want one common data model, right, for everything for the storage of data. There's a lot of history here that people have that they want to move to, that we're talking about with this. And so strategy-wise, we're already ahead of that. We're trying to figure out ways then to take that data and then use data lake storage, for example, even on CDS, because there's options. It's an experimental preview, if I remember correctly, for the CDS integration to Data Lake. But these are things that we're working on as well already at this point. I guess the key thing I just wanted to highlight here is that we've got live data that we're saving to a storage account. And what we can also do is we can use Synapse to be able to now access this data. So if I open up SQL Server Management Studio, and I was showing the guys this before the stream, basically what we're able to do now is we can access then that cube data. So I'll just get logged in here really quickly. It's going to ask me for my approval on my phone. Press accept to it.
We should do a whole confab on this one too.
Yeah, this one we should, because we did it for the
On
Tech
Synapse.
Council on data. Yeah, Synapse. So this is actually using Azure SQL on demand. This isn't actually a database. I don't have really a database that exists. I don't have an Azure SQL server or database that I created. I actually I created a Synapse workspace and then added AXDW is actually a reference to a blob storage or a data lake. And then in that data lake here, I'm able to access, for example, my sales cube. And the reason I wanted to highlight that is because when we come to our data sources, we've got a couple of different options that we can use in customer insights to get to that data. So you can see here's a query then against an actual data lake, and it's in tabular format, right? And I think, Adam, we were talking as well, CDS is getting this as well, right? They're getting a TDS, tabular data stream query that we can use to query the data for the SQL tool. So
I have to wave my hands wildly because I'm so geeked. I was jumping into this I rolled over in bed this morning and was on my phone looking at Power BI articles and some blogs and stuff. And there was one, and I admittedly haven't jumped into this. There's a preview feature for CDS to enable tabular data stream. So it's not GA just yet, but that TDS endpoint, now if you go into Power BI, we should do a whole confab on this. I'm volunteering myself. That's fine. But if you enable TDS and CDS, that endpoint, you go into Power BI. There's some setup to it, but it pulls in your whole schema. Depending on what you want to be analyzing or whatever, it's pulling in the table structure. It's pulling in all of the relationships and setting that up for you. It's actually giving you and providing and pulling in the friendly names for GUIDs. It's pulling in the friendly names for option set values and setting all of your relationships. It's a game changer, especially for more functional consultants who aren't accustomed to setting friendly names and building, like within Power BI, building tables to set up all the friendlies. This is this is a tangent, but it's awesome stuff. So I'm bringing it up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so the point here, though, is just to show, yeah, Mr. Ragnar, you're right. So, wow, I mean, finally being able to access this has been probably one of the biggest bottlenecks to moving people from on-prem to cloud or dark to cloud, because they have so many data sources that use TDS. I mean, ODBC, right? Everyone knows and has used that. So this is the first start of this new revolution of now using these tools, which are catching up to the cloud tools, to be able to get to that data then. So it just makes it so much easier. Yep.
It's so nice because you don't have to learn another tool.
Yep.
This is a tool that you're familiar with. You know how it works. You know how to use it, and you can just dive right in.
And it's a good cross between the end user tool requirement and then also what a developer can do as well, right? Because there are points when we go through this, for example, when we're adding data sources that we may need to get somebody involved to do transformation and we don't know how to do it. Well, they can do it by creating views, for example, with Synapse, and there's just a whole bunch of options that we have basically to be able to drive it, which is really cool. So
from Seabase, what is Seabase?
Sybase?
Sybase. Yeah.
Yep.
I just did a quick search. I was like, what? How far back are we going here?
TDS.
With TDS.
We're 90s. Isn't 90s?
It came from originally designed for Sybase in '84, and then later by Microsoft for SQL.
Yep.
And I remember using it in DOS, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, you would have used it in DOS for sure. TDS, absolutely.
Yeah, I remember that.
Good old days, right? It's all coming around. All right, well, let's go have some fun here. So, guys, you guys can help me kind of direct through this. So what I want to do is I want to get something where I get customer data, right? And so on my customer, I click on it and it says, okay, get your data ready. To view the customer's page, you need to set up the following. I need to add data sources. I need to set up a map. I need to do matching, I guess, and merging. But if I don't have multiple data sources, matching and merging, don't worry, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, that's the matching and merging. So part of this is also not just, customer 123 and multiple data, like multiple instances of customer 123 and multiple databases. It's also matching and merging if you have related data. So pointing to a specific true customer from any sort of activity, like activities in CDS or something like that, or POS transactions from a database. So making sure that you're in the next screen, you'll see like we have to use native Power Query tooling to be able to set those relationships up too.
Well,
and your merge is more like a union, right?
I would expect it to be, right? And that's the thing here, right? I've gone through the setup of this before. On stream, I like just asking you questions because as you're going through and doing this, like, what do you have to worry about, right? So what's the next step? I found it to be a pain after adding a data source and doing a mapping with that data source, trying to remove that data source. Like, there are things that you're going to want to experiment here with ahead of time before you do this in a production environment, because some of them, you'd probably have to contact Microsoft or do a support escalation to remove it, because this is a newer product. And I think that this is considered general availability right now at this point, Adam. CI is, but the other ones are not. So you could theoretically implement this at this point. Adam, it's older than you. She must be talking about TDS, hopefully.
Oh, yeah, when I flubbed Sybase. That I knew that was going to happen too. Hey, it's Confab. I got to get grief for one thing or another.
Exactly. All right, so we're going to add a data source. Let's go ahead and click on the Add Data Source. So it looks like we got a couple of different options. So we've got import data, connect to a common. Ooh, look at that. That's the one I want to click on. Or connect to a common data service. Data sets in the CDS data lake. Okay, interesting. So talk through this. Common data model folder. This is Azure Data Lake. So this is ADLS v2, which is what we were just showing on our storage account, right? So this is accessing this storage account, which has a container inside of it. If I open it in the Explorer real quick here. Oops. The preview is what we'll use for it. So I've got my data folder and example. We are looking at sales cube. Here's the definition of what that cube is, and then here is the data, right? So here's that CSV file that we were doing SQL queries against, which was pretty awesome, I have to say again. All right, so let's get back over here. That's going to be for that. The common data service, this is data sets in common data service data lake. So this is that preview, I'm assuming. Adam, do you know? We can click on it.
The preview?
Yeah.
No, this has been here.
Oh, it has been? Okay.
Yep.
So this would be common data service data set is what we'll call it.
Yeah, the TDS stuff we were talking about, I was geeking out more on like Power BI terms than anything.
Okay, so this is basically then going to be just the CDS database. So
correct.
That's not, because in CDS now, if we go to our admin, powerplatform.com, and this is the interesting thing, is that they're adding so many features so quickly, right? In the environments, I think that there's an option, and that actually might be in the Power Apps, right? That you can take this and then dump it to a data lake as well. Have you seen that yet?
Yeah.
Export to data lake right there. Okay.
Yep.
So this isn't that. So it's not looking at the common data, and that's the thing that we should define for people as we go through this. So remember, we've got a bunch of sites or a bunch of PowerPoints that are on this, and that's why I'm just making sure of this too. So connect to a common data service or connect to a common data model folder, right? So common data model folder typically means Azure Data Lake. Anytime you're going to see that terminology used, typically it's going to be in an Azure Data Lake. Connecting to the Common Data Service, we've talked about this on some of the past streams. Common Data Service is the unified database, right? It's a database that lives in the cloud that you can update from multiple sources, and that's really the glue, right, of Dynamics 365 is the Common Data Service.
SQL, hosted in Azure, owned and operated and managed by Microsoft.
Exactly.
Structured.
And it could even be SQL Server, right? I mean, theoretically, technically in the back end. I don't know what it is, but all right. So that being said, import data then. So let's check that. I want to see that real quick too. So this is a import data source, right? That we could specify. Click on next to this, and I think this is where we're getting into Power Query then,
Power
right?
Query. We're gonna have a number of like connections that come up. So you define what you're bringing in, like what sort of temp or format you're gonna bring in to the system. So
This is your
this
BC connectors in here too.
Yep. So this list has grown even since I think the last time I was in here, and I
Alright.
don't know what the new ones are, but yeah, those are being added to. So this is where if you have legacy databases or you need to bridge certain gaps, the Open Data Initiative from Microsoft's end, these walls are
SAP.
constantly being broken down. So the SAP HANA has been pretty big as of the last year.
Okay, and data source CDS is here as well. Well, hey, let's I'm feeling really daring.
I don't see
today.
Scott. There wasn't a Business Central one in there. It
No.
was before.
There isn't, so let's go ahead and take a look real quick.
I suppose you could use OData.
OData. Yeah,
Yeah.
so we see OData connections, which we could use as well. I didn't click on the online services, Exchange, SharePoint, Power Platform, CDS.
Like how you skipped right over that Salesforce.
I know. Stay
We're
away.
like, Open Data,
Stay
guys.
away.
The walls are down. It's awesome.
I know.
So, are you going to talk about Salesforce?
No,
we're not.
we're not
No,
going
we're
to
not.
talk about Salesforce. All right, so deserve that. It really, I mean, there's many sites that we're in right now where we've got ERP and we're connecting with Salesforce, so it's totally valid. I'm really curious here. So the SQL on demand. So that's what I was trying to get to here. That's why I was copying this. I want to basically get connected to a SQL database, right? So I could do that. I could say my server. I could say AXDW and then connect through an Azure SQL database, right? Then use a Microsoft account to connect to it, no gateway. And this is all live, guys. We've not done anything here.
This is prove it
Yeah,
right here.
yeah.
This is hence the
This is where I'm just like, all right, here we go. This should be.
fingers crossed.
This will be an interesting confab. Sign in, get the approval. Boom, got the approval.
We always have the demo stuff.
Yeah, we do.
We can lean on plenty.
Okay, next. Let's see. Do we get a query back with it? Look at that. I've got my one table in here. So this is basically where I'm using, okay, so we talked about this. It's hard to conceptualize. I wish I had a chart or a graph with it. Maybe I can do it in Excel, right? So basically we have a file. That file is in, okay, you are going to be finicky with me on this. That file exists in a data lake, right? That data lake then was consumed by a Azure SQL on demand. Basically, it was pointing to that. And then that Azure SQL on demand went ahead and was a data source that we just added. So those are the steps that we did to get this so that we could actually access it. Now, what we could do as well, instead of doing this, let's add this so we have it inside of here. Just want to, because I think it has to do some stuff in the background for it.
Yeah.
Look at all those rows. I absolutely love it. Transform the data.
Yeah, do you have GUIDs in here, or did it pull in the friendlies?
I pulled in the friendlies for me because that one is the view basically that we had set up right already. So
Yep.
I think it has all the schema that's there. It's going to validate it and then basically import it, right, is what it's doing in the background.
And this is very similar if you're working. So
I just
even though
added
I'm geeking out on TDS, like where it does all the work for you, historically we have to transform the data in Power BI. We have to, pull in friendlies, set up relationships, all that good stuff. This is no different. So all of it's based on Power Query, and there are some steps you may have to take to make sure that everything is transformed appropriately.
Yep, and that's a good point. So we just did a customer list basically. Now, data-wise, let's talk about that then too. Data sources-wise, you may be sending your invoices, right? So your customer invoice history, your customer jobs. I mean, any type of table that has data around a customer or a metric that you may want to have, you want that as a data source. Is that a correct assumption, Adam?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Most definitely.
Okay.
And a lot to go back. I don't want to use it as too much of a crutch, or beat the proverbial dead horse. That's such a gruesome analogy.
Yeah.
But but a lot of the success for what we're doing right now, we're going in blind and we're playing with some awesome like some fun connectors in Azure Data Lakes and kind of telling more of a technical story. But to go back to like the success criteria and the pre-planning and what are the outcomes you're really driving toward, like that all is still going to be very important in all of this.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to the edit here real quick just to take a look at it. So you can edit the query after the fact too, it looks like. So we can do updates to this data source then. We haven't used it in a mapping yet, right?
One thing to keep in mind
is
here.
really cool.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind here is if you pull in data and you build business measures, so those are those
Yep.
KPIs that are on that home screen.
Yep.
That takes finessing to get to the discrete business measures, those valuable pieces of data.
Yep.
If you end up going back in and transforming the data sources, you can face some breaks.
Okay.
So just be mindful of that.
Good to know. So if you add the data source, so we did this one where it actually did an interim level to get to the data source, right? And what we can do is we can basically cut this out if we want to go right to the data lake. And that's where we do the common data model folder. So if we do that, and I have not tested this at all, so this is totally blind. This would be data lake, right? AD. We'll do that. Okay, so that's good, right? Gotta love that. Okay, so we've got the container ID, and so we should be able to figure this out, hopefully, right? So let's go back over to Customer Insights. The account name would have to be specified for this, and so the account kind. I'm not sure where the account name information is for this. Do you know right offhand?
Is it the storage account up top?
It might be the resource group name is what we'll call it. The access key. Let me just see if I've got this in my wonderful notepad. And of course, we can't show that one on stream. Adam, do you have any great stories to tell while we're waiting here?
Well, I didn't walk into any cars this week.
I was waiting for Stallman to say something about that too.
So there's that. I got ahead of it. See, if I own it, then I'm invincible on that one. I didn't walk into any cars. My wife and I just went through, doubled back through, tripled back through all the Star Wars movies recently.
Oh, looks like you guys are going to be able to see my key. So there we go. SA is what it is. Okay, SRFD 365 SA. That is the wonderful thing about streaming. Access key, and I think this SRFD 365 storage is the container. And this is SRFD 365 SA. D365 SA. Account key, container actually was wrong too, right? So we're learning here as we go. The container name is this container name. Can I copy that? That is the container. Okay, we're going to try it. See if it gives us any error messages with it. Nothing yet so far, guys. I think we're in the clear. Oh, look at that. Whoa. Okay, this is really cool.
Whoa.
I'm excited about this. So this has been a conversation that I've been having internally. What I don't like right now is that we had this conversation here too. When you want to add a view into Azure Synapse, you have to basically script the view and take this file called the model JSON to interpret the fields that are inside of the CSV file. And so basically what you have to do is you have to create a view, and then you have to go through and name every field and then put the data type around it, right? And so that's a pain in the butt because it's already there in the model JSON. Well, the model JSON is supposed to represent that open data initiative, Adam, that you were talking about. Salesforce, Adobe, SAP as well, I think, are part of that, and I don't, maybe it's SAP and Adobe are the primary ones with it. But what they talked to with Microsoft is that they said when we dump our data into the data lake, we're going to have a model JSON file, and that's going to define our fields and our relationships and our partitions of data and all that kind of stuff inside of that file. So that way, when you add it then to an application that knows about the Open Data Initiative, you can then import this file. So I'm excited, Adam, because this may take all of it does. Look at that, all of the entities.
Slick.
Okay, so we can do customer, we could do the invoice accounts, the invoice lines, their invoices that they have. We can do the customers.
So going back to 83 hours.
Yeah, right. Here we go.
We're telling, yes, we have to live between certain cones. Microsoft has set up, a tool we have to use it certain ways, but look at the efficiency that we just displayed. And this is all, to be candid, we haven't spun this connection up in the past. So this is, being able to, with a few clicks, obviously there's some setup and again, the pre-planning and some setup steps here, but this is awesome. So the whoa was very well
nice.
warranted.
Yeah, exactly. Because it makes it so much easier. Because now, when you do that data lake integration, where it's dumping this sales cube, you can see then in the sales cube here. If I go to that model file and we open it, just take a quick look at it. It's like no end user wants to interact with this, right? This is not what I would classify as fun. Now, it tells me everything I need to know about all the data sources, but the nice thing is on Customer Insights is that when we added it, look at that, 8 entities that were added for it. I theoretically wouldn't have to even have an Azure Synapse connection for it.
So this was way more
easier
efficient than even we did in the Airlift.
Is it really?
Yeah, well, we just focused on importing CSV files and then match, in the transform data, it was, setting the relationships and making sure that everything was set in square, but coming from a static document-based data source. This is awesome.
Yeah. So I guess next step then, so if we go back to our customers, we can just go through this, right? So it wants us to map now. So what are we mapping? So at least 2 entities are required to configure it and generate the customer profiles prior to setting up segments, measures, and activities. So, what we're going to do is we're going to say from our import one and from our ADLS, right? They should be the same theoretically, right? Unless we change something, maybe.
Well, this is where we can bring in the aggregate data, the transactional data as well, to set those relationships properly, and then when we go to the match stage, that's when we can consolidate from various data sources, something like customer.
Okay, so mapping, like what I'm hearing here is that, like for the sales cube, the address, like it looks like it's trying to fill out the base data that it's requiring, right? So these are fields right here that map to common data service fields, right? So this is actually the F&O field name, basically, as well describe it.
The most important thing here is that you get your IDs mapped appropriately. So in the ID setup, it looked like there were a few that were there. Just make sure that if you're going to use one in particular for everything, like the true up ID that you'll use to latch everything onto, make sure that that's set. So the rec ID would be
and so ID,
the true ID, and so the other ones, make sure that the other ones are not actually as well mapping to the true ID.
Yeah, and so the row unique key, and that would be interesting to understand too, is that we've got rec IDs and we've got all these different identifiers, obviously, for the record that we can have. There's also end user based record IDs, right? And so the account number, for example, is one that I would say would be more commonly a primary key for this, right?
And do know that we don't have, if you're used to like CDS development, there are, or CRM in the past, alternate keys. So you have your primary entity or record key, and we can set up alternate keys for integration setups or understanding dupes or anything like that. There's nothing discreetly called out right here, but in the match stage, maybe even in some of the next steps in map, we can set up matching heuristics. We can set up the logic based on other data and other criteria. So if you're concerned that in this setup right here, the screen we're looking at right now doesn't contain the ability to set up alternate keys, that feature is there, just not labeled that and living on this screen here.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove some of these, and I want to put in the customer. So what I did here is that customer is actually the key I want this to key off of. So it's filling out, it looks like the region information, the county. The customer is technically what we would classify as the identifier. Now, when, Adam, did they talk about account? Like, when do you specify, is that the account number? Is that the same as
It's
ID?
it's going to depend on, that's where it gets a little tricky. Before before Confab started here, the three of us were talking about the architectural differences between in the Microsoft world, ERP and CRM. So the account and contact design in CRM, which really constitutes the customer data, versus the actual like customer table in BC or FinOps. Like there's an architectural difference there in how all of those relationships are set up. So this one was a little gray. Obviously for Microsoft and going through, the content was great, the instruction was great, but we're definitely locked into a very specific business case, and this is all scripted out and mapped out. We didn't actually pick this apart in whole.
Okay, good to know. I guess the point here, though, is that you can actually select what fields you want to map. You can have that in your data source. When I click on the select fields, I can say, these are the fields I want exposed on here. Then you're basically mapping them to one of these set fields that is inside of our list, right? So one of the pre-work things I'd recommend would be get a list of all the different fields that are inside of here. So that way when you're at the data source definition, that if you have to add those columns, you can add those names, you can map things, you can collate, you can join it together, you can do all that work then up front. So, okay, that makes sense. So I've got two primary keys that are set here. I'm going to go ahead and save it away real quick and just see what happens. Changes have been saved. That's good. Then we go through the matching process, right? Because we're trying to unify this. And this is where we can then set a matching rule, right? So,
and this is what I was talking about a minute ago.
Okay.
Is like, yes, we don't have alternate keys spelled out in the initial that initial screen we were working off of the mapping.
Yep.
But this is where we can go and set the logic. If something doesn't match on certain data criteria, we can build in additional logic to that.
Okay, so what I can do here is I can import multiple data sources to be in my matching order. In this situation, I could say, for example, that this data source really has what I believe is all of my customer records, right? So every single account that's there. And so what I want to do is I want to include all those records, but then I only want to match additional records to be added from data source number 2 if they don't match, right? Or if they match. Mm-hmm. Is that what it does? Does it matter?
What was if
it doesn't match, for example?
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
It is?
Right?
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So then when you run that rule, you basically then finally go through, and then so it needs rules. As you can see, create a new rule
for each source.
Yeah, so that would be the primary key, right? Is the rule name, and we're saying that when the customer is the same as the customer, which we can normalize or not, that's the matching rule then with it, right? So we could then have white space removal inside of it. If you had data sources that had upper and lower case, it looks like text to lower.
And down below that, we should have like a degree of certainty slider, degree of match slider. Right there. Yep. So the precision level as well as the value, and then you can see underneath there's an add condition. So we can get pretty granular with how we're setting up these match rules.
Multiple rules. Okay. Yep. So once we have that, then we should be able to save this, and then we should be able to run it, and it's basically going to do the merge process. Is that what it's doing in the background?
And you can see, we should note in the admin section, you can see the jobs that are running. So if you have any synchronization that's occurring, if you go into the match, you can see that we're running right now. So you get that global view of everything that's going down in terms of sync.
Okay. So
there's some error checking or logs in here too, right?
There will be. If we're encountering any issues, it's just in classic Microsoft. In their way, it's pretty vague at times, but it's there.
Yeah, when I ran this the first time on my system, I had those rules all messed up. So going through the log file helped me debug that.
Did it? Okay.
Yep.
And I kind of remember that too when we went through it. So this is actually going through and doing the Unify experience basically with it. And when we click on customers, for example, now it says the match. Well, we're running the match in the background right now, right?
Yeah.
So
It might
it's
be
got to
good
wait.
to might be good to step, given where we're at in time. I mean, it might be good to just take a look at some of the stuff that was already in there. Like we're walking through at a really high level the process to make sure that we have that unified customer record, any of the aggregate data that's related to it, to get the building blocks in place, to get these business measures and true KPIs on our home screen and ready for our
Well,
teams.
let's
But
flip to that. Yeah. So let's go to the demo, right? And then, so this is where we start looking at, we have in this environment, so we just switched to a different environment, the demo environment. We went through the data sources. We have the entities that have been imported. We've done the unify, the merge process that we were showing. And then basically what we've done is we've defined some activities that are inside of here, manage your customer timeline and activities, and then as well some measures and segments, right? So we've basically created different measures. So number of online purchases, for example, is one of these measures. And in the
churn
measure,
rates
we're
are in there, and
exactly, we're looking at a table, it looks like the entity. We're doing a count on the number of purchase IDs that then displays the number of purchases, right? So we're basically doing what you do in a BI process, right? When you're building an OLAP cube, you're defining, is it an aggregate? Is it the first? Is it the sum? Of what value, basically. And so that ends up showing something like this, right? So,
now these are the true customers. Like
yep.
after all the mapping and matching and merging, like this is your consolidated, completely global view of your customer.
So this is after the merging. Multiple entities could be used with this, multiple data sources, CDM, Power Query, all those things that we just talked about. And when you click on it, then these are then the measures, right? Total online spend, total online purchases. That was one of those measures that we were just looking at. Churn risk, online spend, potential brands that they may be more prone to purchase.
And this right here, the potential, like when we see things prepended with potential, I believe this is part of, Scott just had a screen up a second ago that looked at enrichment. So you can actually plug in, and this is that intelligent piece of the system where it's going to proactively notify you or break out where you should be spending your marketing efforts, where you should be spending your sales and communication efforts. So this is the intelligent portion of, or part of the intelligent portion of customer insights.
And this is using the AI capabilities, right? So when you set this up and do the enrichment of the data, you actually define what you're sending out, and then it's doing that. It's looking at brand data from Microsoft Graph, for example, and then applying it to yours. So what's really exciting about this is if you think about the product insights, similar products, substitutes, like what's more
Yep.
common for it.
Upsell, cross-sell, new markets. I mean, or when we're looking at the product to the market insights, it's going to be super powerful. When the product and market stuff comes out, it's going to be awesome.
Yep,
Or maybe
absolutely.
it's out. I mean, maybe it's already in preview. I haven't been hands-on with it though.
Yeah, it looks like in chat, Rad was saying the Stratature looks like there was a company that had a very similar look and feel before they were acquired by Microsoft. It very well could be related to that, right? I mean, with some snap-ins then to the actual data sources with it that drive it. So, but the thing
And
here is, go ahead. Yep.
oh, I was going to say for segments in particular, when we're telling a story about outputs, it's great. We bring in all this data. It does a lot for us. Go back to the 83 hours theme. But what then? Like, what do we do? And what can this plug into? What sort of automation can we lean into? For segments in particular, I get jazzed up because these segments can be generated with intelligence. So defining market segments intelligently in customer insights, and that can actually then feed into Dynamics 365 marketing to develop customer segments for you. With the AI ML tooling, not you manually setting everything up. It can also feed in, true customer insights, like when people are opening emails through a day. So on a one-to-one basis, if that's your marketing strategy, especially if you're in a B2C space, think about the power of being able to set up a customer journey and pinpoint exactly in an hour increment, hour blocks, when I need to send an email to Marcus or when I need to send an email to Scott throughout a given day based on when they're historically opening my emails anyway, just
Yeah, and
en masse.
it's dynamic here too. Like, so if you look at this this segment that's set up. It's a dynamic segment that can have multiple groupings that then also has different types of joins right to it as well that you can define for the segment. So this is newer. I don't remember
Yep.
seeing this.
This is new.
Yeah, but that's to me super powerful because now we can use multiple entities, right? So we were just showing the import of the entity. Let's say that we just took the entire sales cube data model. We could actually consume that into here, set those measures up, and then start reporting off of it right here, off of all the measures that are inside of that particular cube. So without doing a mapping exercise that, creating SQL table views, basically, we can just consume it. And then from there, basically, go through the unification enrichment process. And I guess you could, if you wanted to use this where you didn't have multiple data sources, right? Because it's requiring you to go through this unify experience, right, for your customers. I guess you could just create a blank Excel file as a second source, right? Because of Power Query, to then have no customer in there, or one customer in there, and it unifies it, right? And then basically you've got a whole list of your customers that you can use this with then.
Yep.
So, okay. Well, that's really cool. Is there anything else, Adam? I mean, the other thing obviously is the export too, right? So we talked about the data going in. We've shown the visualizations, the segments, the measures. So if you want to do a GUI-based BI cube that you want to create that's around customers, for example, because this is customer insights, you could do that. But also you can export this as well, right? So there's an API that you can access this information with. We can save it as well to Azure Blob Storage. Synapse as well for the Synapse analytics. You can add it as a source. And then in Power BI, we were looking at this before, we can actually consume this from Power BI now as well, right?
Yep.
So we can actually connect and get to that information too. Perfect. Guys, anything else that you can think of with this customer insights?
For CI, no, I just, I don't want to say infancy, but like it's still early-ish in the product development for this and the CDP overall. Obviously, we're waiting on product and market insights as well, but this is where the price tag might look a little steep on a month-by-month basis, but we talked through the breakdown of that. How does that translate into effort and person hours and focus and everything? So, to me anyway, it tells its own story, and it's pretty intuitive to jump in, especially if you have been working with any cubing, even at a functional level, just enterprise data. It's easy enough to start in there and driving some valuable KPIs and business measures out of this. And then obviously we have downstream. Where is this going? What is this supporting? Where are we porting this data to? And what sort of work streams are we influencing or impacting from this?
And I'd be really curious, everyone on the stream too. I mean, if you guys decide that you want to go down this path, we can help obviously with the data lake structure and going through and defining what you need to do to have that set up and what platform update. For example, if you're on finance and supply chain already, theoretically you could enable then that data lake export and just spin up a trial instance and just experiment a little bit with it to see if it makes it easier to create those metrics and measures that you can then consume from Power BI or send out to Dynamics 365 for sales. So this, I think, it's going to get bigger. I think the product insights is also another one I'm really excited about because there's a lot of product-centric questions that people have, and having an analytical workspace to be able to set up active measures and segments of customers that can be dynamically updated, I just think is a really powerful capability. So
Most definitely.
Cool. Well, we are at time, guys. Thank you again for joining. It was a lot of fun to go through customer insights. I think, Adam's got his
One more,
cameo.
I just use my geeky nerdy cameo for the week, and this one's a little bit more heartfelt because you use the platforms you have to raise voices, right? So this week is Finn from Star Wars. If anybody's been paying attention to the news, John Boyega was out there on the front lines of the peaceful protests. So got to give a shout out. Black Lives Matter.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, 2 weeks from now, I think we've got. I didn't get a chat from Sabrina beforehand, so I'm a little bit.
Enterprise Asset Management.
Is it EAM?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
That's what I thought it was. I wanted to make sure. So look at that, Sabrina in chat even. Thank you, Sabrina. Thursday, June 11th, EAM. So July 2nd at 11 a.m. We've got the Power Automation Power Hour. That's where we're going to take some of our real flows and automates that we have and PVAs, and we're going to have some fun with that. All of us are going to be creating integrations with Dynamics. EAM, it's going to be just as exciting if you've got rolling stock or if you got machinery that you would like to support and maintain through fixed assets and also have it impact production schedule and having, preventative maintenance. Well, that's what we're going to talk about with the EAM and the work order.
I'll be the weird +1
Yeah.
CRM guy. That just feels. I'll
Well,
be the hype man.
You got to figure out what we can do to get
assets.
CRM in it, right? So yeah, it'll be fun though. It'll be fun. So thank you again, guys. Do appreciate your time. We will see you 2 weeks from now, and stay safe and enjoy the weather. It's getting nice out there.